Hi everyone, my name is Alex Rawlings and you're watching September's edition of Just Ask Alex. We've got two really interesting questions today. The first one is about how we learn gender in a language and whether it matters if we get it wrong. And the second is about tenses, when to use the right one and how to learn them properly. Enjoy. So gender is something quite confusing at first for native English speakers who are learning foreign languages because it's just a concept that we don't have in English. Fortunately, 9 times out of 10, if you use the wrong gender when speaking the language, you will be understood, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But again, this really depends on what your priorities are for learning your new language. If you want to sound like a native speaker, it's tightening these kind of grammar points that really make a difference between being understood as a foreigner or not. Basically, I would advise that you should make as big an effort as possible to try and learn the gender of nouns and learn to use them correctly. Incorporating the study of gender into your vocabulary learning does not have to be too big a challenge. I basically always learn vocabulary with the article put in front, and it's almost like the article becomes a part of the word. For example, in German, der Tisch, das Fenster. All of these things can be learnt quite easily if you just think the word for window is das Fenster, not just Fenster. The more you start to use these, the less likely you are to get them confused, and the more natural it seems to you that it could only ever be der Tisch and das Fenster because you will never have heard anything else. If it helps, you could also try and learn gender-related stories to try and remember the gender of nouns. So you could think of a story like Der Mann sitzt am Tisch. The man is sitting at the table, and of course it's a man sitting at the table, it's der Tisch. Or you could say something like Die Frau geht zur Bushaltestelle. The woman is going to the bus stop. It's a woman going to the bus stop. It's die Bushaltestelle. Bushaltestelle is feminine. Fortunately, there are a number of shortcuts as well that will help you to learn gender in your new language. So for example, in German, a lot of nouns end in things like ung and schaft. Those are always feminine. If you're learning a language like Russian, for example, Russian has an extremely regular system of gender. If anything ends in a consonant, it's nearly always masculine. If it ends in an o or a ye, it's nearly always neuter. And soft sign and a and e endings are nearly always feminine. Every language has these rules. You need to get your hands on a pretty good grammar book which will explain to you these rules so that you'll be able to work out what the gender of nouns is for yourself. It doesn't always work. When you make mistakes and people correct you, make sure that you learn from them so that you don't get confused about the gender of a noun again. The second question that I was sent in is about tenses. They are to do with the two different past tenses that exist in Spanish in particular, how to know when to use each one, when to know whether you're using them correctly. So I'm going to respond basically about how this works in Spanish, but this is generally applicable to most European languages, which is that there are two past tense, the imperfective and the perfective, and most of the time they're doing the same thing in every single language. So we always use both past tenses in every language to tell a story. It might not be, you know, like a literary story, but it's some kind of event that's happened which you're telling someone else, which requires you to put it in the past tense. So I'm going to explain the two tenses based on how you use them both in this context to tell a story. So the imperfective tense is used to provide background information, descriptions, things that are constant at the time of the story that you're telling. They are imperfect actions, which is where it gets its name from, which means that they're actions that are not completed. So for example, if you're telling a friend in Spanish about something that happened to you at night when you went to the supermarket, all of those things are going to be in the imperfective. Iba al supermercado por la noche, hacía mucho frío. I was going to the supermarket at night, it was very cold. The fact that the person was going to the supermarket at night and that it was cold do not change throughout whatever happens next in the story. Therefore, they must be incompleted actions and they must be in the imperfective. Now, the perfective or preterite in Spanish are things that happen on the background of what has already been set up in the imperfective. I like to think of it like this. The imperfective is a constant, which is the red line throughout what's being told, and the perfective are the little stars that dot around the constant of the imperfective to provide information about actions that are taking place in that scenario. So, iba al supermercado por la noche, hacía mucho frío, y de repente encontré a un amigo viejo que sonrió y me dijo hola. Now we have the preterite in the story, which is we know that the speaker is going to the supermarket, we know that it's cold, and we know that that's still happening. And then suddenly she meets an old friend. That's in the preterite, meet, encontré. He smiled, sonrió, and he said hello. Me dijo hola. All of those things that have just happened in the preterite are completed actions. They are listed, if you like, as a sequence of events. And that's how we understand it with the help of the preterite tense. If the speaker wanted to say, the man was speaking to me, and then something else happened, he or she would have to then start using the imperfective. So we say, me hablaba y de repente, and then start using the preterite tense as well. One way to get used to this is to read a lot of children's stories, things that are actually very basic in terms of vocabulary, but that are grammatically accurate, so that you can really start to understand why the writer has used this particular tense here and this particular tense there. Generally, the more you practice, the more you expose yourself to the language, the more you'll get used to the idea that there are these two tenses, but actually that they kind of work together and that you can use them in that way as well. So thank you very much for your questions, and I look forward to receiving more again next month. As always, you can contact me via my blog, rawlings.com, via Twitter, also on my Facebook page, and of course, if you have a question about language learning, just ask Alex. Good luck with your language learning, and I'll see you next month.